The rain started before sunset, a steady October storm that washed the streets of Chicago in silver light. Daniel Harper drove through it with tight hands on the steering wheel, thinking about how quiet his house had become lately. He had been married to Emily for 8 years. From the outside, their life looked strong and stable. They had a small brick home, steady careers, and photos on social media that showed smiling faces during holidays and summer trips. But lately, something had shifted. The warmth between them had thinned into polite conversations and tired routines. Emily worked late most nights, chasing a promotion at her marketing firm. Daniel, a high school history teacher, usually came home first. He would cook dinner, set the table, and wait. Sometimes she answered emails while eating. Neither of them meant to drift apart, but distance grew quietly, like a crack in glass. That evening, Emily called him while he was leaving school. She sounded rushed. She needed him to drop off some documents at her mother's house because she wouldn't make it in time. Daniel agreed without hesitation. He always tried to help. He respected Margaret Sullivan, Emily's mother. She had been widowed years ago and lived alone near Lake Michigan in a neat, peaceful neighborhood. She had a way of looking at people as if she could see what they were not saying. When Daniel arrived, rain fell harder, bouncing off the pavement. Margaret opened the door quickly, almost as if she had been waiting. She wore a simple navy sweater, her silver hair tied back neatly. The house smelled of cinnamon tea and fresh bread. It felt warm in a way Daniel's own house hadn't felt in months. "You look tired," she said gently as he stepped inside. "Just a long week," he answered, trying to sound light. She led him to the kitchen table. The lights were soft. Daniel handed her the envelope of documents, but she set it aside without looking. Instead, she poured tea into 2 cups and sat across from him. They talked at first about normal things: his students, Emily's busy schedule, the changing weather. But Margaret listened closely, and Daniel noticed that she wasn't simply hearing his words. She was studying his face, his pauses, the way his voice lost energy when he mentioned home. After a few minutes, she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Are you happy, Daniel?" The question felt simple, but it hit him harder then. He opened his mouth quickly. "Of course," he said. Yes, I'm fine." Margaret did not argue. She did not smile. She just looked at him calmly. "You don't have to give me the safe answer." Daniel felt his chest tighten. No one had asked him that in a long time. He stared at the steam rising from his cup. "Emily and I are just busy," he said finally. "It's a busy season." "Busy can turn into distant," Margaret replied. "And distant can turn into lonely." The word lonely settled in the room like a heavy truth. Daniel had not said it out loud before, but he had felt it. He missed laughing with Emily. He missed feeling chosen at the end of the day instead of scheduled between meetings. Margaret leaned forward slightly. "You work hard. You try to be patient. I see that." Her voice carried no judgment, only understanding. For a moment, Daniel felt something he had not felt in a long time seen. Appreciated the feeling. He straightened in his chair. "It's normal," he said quickly. "Every marriage has phases." "Yes," she agreed softly, "but phases should not erase a person." The rain grew louder. Outside, Daniel's thoughts moved fast. He respected this woman. She was his wife's mother. There were lines that should never be crossed. Yet the conversation was not inappropriate. There was no flirtation, no bold words, just emotion and honesty. And somehow that made it more powerful. Margaret reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. The gesture was gentle, almost motherly, yet it sent a rush through him. It was not romance, it was comfort. And comfort in that moment felt dangerous. "I see you, Daniel," she said quietly, "and I worry that you are disappearing." He pulled his hand back slowly, heart beating faster. "I should head home," he said, standing up. But before he reached the door, she spoke again. What if you didn't have to feel alone anymore? He stopped. The words were calm, not dramatic. She did not step closer. She did not lower her voice in a way that felt secret. But the meaning carried weight. She was not offering anything physical. She was offering connection, understanding, the kind of emotional closeness that had been missing in his marriage. "Margaret," he said carefully, "this is complicated." "I know," she replied, "and I am not asking you to betray anyone. I am asking you to be honest with yourself. You deserve to feel valued." He looked at her, trying to understand. Her intention, was she crossing a line? Or was she holding up a mirror? There was sadness in her eyes, not temptation. She seemed more concerned than bold. The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling across the lake. Daniel felt as if the weather matched the conflict inside him. He loved Emily. He had built a life with her. But he could not deny the ache he carried every day. "I don't want to make a mistake," he admitted. "Then don't," Margaret said simply. "But don't ignore what you're feeling either." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Daniel realized this was not about romance. It was about attention, about being understood. And emotional attention can blur lines just as easily as anything else. He thanked her for the tea and stepped out into the rain. Cold air hit his face, clearing his head slightly. As he drove home, windshield wipers moving fast, he replayed every word. Had she made an offer? Or had she just named the truth he was afraid to face? When he reached home, the house was dark. Emily had texted that she would be late again. Daniel stood in the quiet living room, listening to the ticking clock. He felt restless. The conversation with Margaret echoed in his mind. "You deserve to feel appreciated." He walked into the bedroom later when Emily finally returned and fell asleep quickly from exhaustion. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe. She looked peaceful, unaware of the storm inside him. He lay down beside her, but did not sleep. His thoughts raced. Was emotional connection outside marriage already a form of betrayal? Nothing had happened. No boundaries had been clearly crossed. Yet something had shifted. He realized that the most dangerous part was not attraction. It was understanding. Margaret had seen his loneliness clearly, and that recognition had touched him deeply. As rain continued to fall through the night, Daniel stared at the ceiling and understood that he was standing at a crossroads. He could ignore the feelings and continue drifting in silence, or he could confront what was missing in his marriage before something truly broke. Margaret's words had opened a door in his mind. Whether he stepped through it or closed it forever would define everything that came next. And as morning light slowly replaced the storm, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. His life would not return to the quiet routine it had been before that rainy evening. Something had awakened inside him, and he could not pretend otherwise. The days after that rainy night felt different for Daniel Harper. He moved through his routine like a man carrying a secret weight. He woke early, made coffee, and watched the pale Chicago sunrise from the kitchen window. Emily rushed out most, mornings already on phone calls before she reached her car. Daniel kissed her goodbye, but the kiss felt brief, distracted. He told himself nothing had happened. There had been no betrayal, no broken vows. Yet his thoughts kept circling back to Margaret's quiet words. At school, he tried to focus on his students. He spoke about American history with energy, asking questions, encouraging debate. But between lessons, his mind drifted. He thought about loneliness, about what it meant to feel unseen. He hated how much he had needed Margaret's understanding. That realization scared him more than anything else. One evening, Emily came home. Later than usual, her face glowing with excitement. She had news. Her company was considering her for a promotion. It would mean more responsibility, more travel, and longer hours. She spoke quickly, full of ambition and pride. Daniel listened carefully. He smiled, congratulated her, and told her he was proud, and he meant it. But he also felt a quiet fear. More distance. More empty evenings, thought that weekend, Emily suggested. They visit her mother for Sunday dinner. Daniel's chest tightened at the thought, but he agreed. Avoiding Margaret would only raise questions. The drive to her house felt longer than usual. The sky was clear this time, no rain, no storm. But the tension inside him had not faded. Margaret welcomed them warmly, as always. She hugged Emily tightly and greeted Daniel with calm politeness. If there was any memory of their private conversation, she hid it well. Dinner was peaceful. They spoke about Emily's possible promotion, about travel to New York, about career growth. Margaret looked proud of her daughter. Daniel watched them and felt a sharp sense of guilt. Whatever he had felt that night, he never wanted to hurt this family. Halfway through the evening, Emily stepped outside to take an important call from her boss. The house grew quiet. Daniel found himself alone in the living room with Margaret. Once again, sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and warm. There was no storm to hide behind this time. Margaret broke the silence first. "I never meant to complicate your life," she said calmly. Daniel took a slow breath. "You didn't," he answered. "But you made me think." She nodded. "Sometimes thinking is necessary." He looked at her carefully. There was no flirtation in her expression, no hidden invitation. Only seriousness. That surprised him. Part of him had expected tension. Instead, there was clarity. "I've been confused," he admitted. "I don't want to cross any lines." "And you haven't," she replied firmly. But loneliness can push people toward lines they never planned to approach. Daniel sat down across from her. "Why did you say those things that night?" Margaret folded her hands gently. "Because I saw you fading. And I love my daughter enough to protect her marriage, even if she doesn't see the cracks." Her answer stunned him. He had assumed her offer was personal, emotional, maybe even selfish. Her words held something different. "You were not offering." He hesitated, searching for the right word. "I was offering awareness," she finished softly. "Not myself." Daniel felt his heartbeat slow. He realized that what he had heard as temptation had actually been concern. Margaret had sensed the distance between him and Emily. She had wanted him to confront it before it turned into something worse. "I would never take what belongs to my daughter," she continued, "but I refuse to ignore when someone is hurting." Clarity in her voice washed away the confusion that had built inside him for days. He had misread the moment because he was desperate for comfort. She had simply held up a mirror to his pain. Emily's laughter floated in from outside as she finished. Her call. Daniel looked toward the window. He suddenly saw his wife not as distant, but overwhelmed, ambitious, trying to secure their future. He realized he had been silently waiting for her to notice his loneliness without ever speaking about it. Margaret watched his expression change. "Marriage is not lost in one storm," she said. "It fades in silence." Those words struck him deeply. Silence. That had been the real problem. Not long hours, not ambition, not temptation. Silence. When Emily returned inside, smiling and energized, Daniel stood up and walked toward her. He wrapped his arm around her waist gently. She looked surprised but pleased. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said honestly. Everything can be. On the drive home, he didn't stare out the window like before. He held Emily's hand across the center console. The gesture felt small but meaningful. She squeezed back. That night, instead of turning away in bed, Daniel faced her. His voice felt nervous but steady. "Can we talk?" he asked. Emily blinked, surprised. Of course. He didn't accuse, he didn't blame. He simply told the truth. "I've been feeling lonely," he said. "Not because you don't love me, but because we stopped sharing things. I miss you, even when you're right next to me." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She had not expected this. I thought I was working hard for us, she whispered. I didn't realize I was pulling away. They talked for hours. About stress, about pressure, about how ambition had slowly replaced connection. Emily admitted she felt the distance too, but thought Daniel was strong enough not to need reassurance. Daniel admitted he had hidden his feelings because he didn't want to seem weak. For the first time in months, they listened. Without interrupting, they reached for each other without hesitation. No dramatic promises, no grand speeches. Just honesty. The following week, Daniel visited Margaret alone one last time. He wanted closure. She opened the door with her usual calm smile. I understand. Now, he told her. She stepped aside and let him in. Good. They sat at the same kitchen table where the stormy conversation had happened. The room felt lighter now. You reminded me what I was about to lose, Daniel said. Margaret shook, her head gently. You reminded yourself. He realized she was right. She had not tried to take him away. She had tested his awareness. She had shown him the risk without encouraging the fall. I was standing near a line, he admitted. Yes, she agreed. And you stepped back. There was no tension between them anymore. Only respect. Whatever emotional spark had flickered. That rainy night had transformed into something steady and mature. I'm grateful, he said sincerely. For what? She asked for helping me fight for my marriage instead of running from it. Margaret smiled softly. The strongest relationships are not perfect. They are protected. Daniel left her house feeling clear, not confused. The air outside was crisp. Lake Michigan shimmered under the afternoon sun. The storm from that night felt far away. Over the next few months, Daniel and Emily worked on their connection. They scheduled time together without phones. They cooked dinner side by side. They spoke openly about stress before it built into resentment. Emily still pursued her promotion, but she learned to balance ambition with presence. Daniel stopped, hiding his needs behind quiet patience. Their marriage was not magically fixed. There were still busy days and small disagreements. But the silence was gone. He would remember how close he had felt to stepping into emotional betrayal without fully realizing it. Always begin with actions. Commitment over confusion. And in that choice, everything changed.